Hello everyone, I am excited to come back for a video here to talk about why millennials don't want to have children. And in this video, I'm also going to announce that, well, I am pregnant with my third child. So this millennial is having children. But anyway, so I thought the topic would be fitting. If you watched my last video, I kind of mentioned stepping back, focusing on the family, and also, honestly, some of the political stuff just can really drag you down in a way that's not necessarily too helpful for life. So anyway, I'm still kind of going to be in that mode, but I do want to occasionally make videos. So if there's a particular topic, especially more of an evergreen topic, that you'd want me to address, I can just consider that like, okay, if I'm, already have makeup on or whatever, like I'll maybe talk about that topic at some point. But I probably can't keep up with current events because, like I said, focusing on the family. And actually, I decided on a kind of new direction that is more passive, where I don't have to be like making videos, and sometimes I have technical problems and this and that. And so I started a blog. It's really for women, and I realize there's a lot of men, honestly, that watch this channel, but especially for wives, girlfriends, sisters, whatever, share it. It's the Wholehearted Homemaker, and so it's really equipping women to embrace, enjoy, and excel at being a stay-at-home mom and homemaker. And it does talk some towards work-at-home moms as well as sort of that entrepreneurial business side. I'm no longer trying to do business and mindset coaching, but just talking about boundaries and still prioritizing family, kind of like I'm trying to do with these online efforts. But then my website is courageousinchrist.com. So now I will get into the topic of the day, which is why millennials don't want kids. And so what I'm going to do is I think I'm just going to go ahead and kind of share comments about my thoughts on it and why it is throughout this, but I'm going to go through what the Rooster says, why millennials say they don't want kids, and why the New York Times does. And I will add right now that I believe that a lot of this has to do with just the framing of children and what they are, and it's like everybody's mindset has really shifted from believing in legacy. In the Bible, Abraham, he talked to God and he was like, God, like I have all this money, I have all this stuff, but like what good does it do when I don't have a child? Like it's worthless to me without a child. And it was like, he was focused on his legacy. That is just not where we're at anymore. And I think though, a lot of times I'm going to blame the millennials' parents. You can't exactly blame anybody, but I just think that sort of what has happened is people have experienced their parents bring them into the world, but then don't prioritize them, or don't prioritize them in a meaningful way. Like they'll spend a ton of money on them, they'll get them toys, whatever, they love them in so many ways. We are too child focused. A lot of times women have real problems with putting kids above their husband in marriage, and it's kind of like, I can't let you sleep by yourself, and it's like, I'm sure the husband wants a child in their bed all the time. And so in some ways we're way too child focused, but in some ways it's kind of like, but my career, this happens. And so there's a lot of examples of that when people gave details about all of the reasoning. And a lot of it did come back to, well, this was how my parents were. And maybe I didn't even blame them, but I felt like I should not have been involved with what they were doing. I shouldn't have been there. No family identity. There's no real like legacy of like passing on values. When parenting becomes, we're going to have a child and we're just going to help them survive, and try to like love them, but not really have any real idea of what that means. Then, they go through their whole life and there's not that connection. Some of these thoughts really get ingrained in some people, but then maybe not so much in other people. Because as much as I know a lot of comments on this channel is kind of like, oh, women are crazy these days, and nobody gets married and has kids and blah, blah, blah. There are certainly bubbles of people, like if I look at when I was involved in Campus Crusade for Christ, at my campus in college, and I look those people up, they all got married and had kids. A lot of times when people have really strong, more conservative Christian values, they maintained that family thing. But I do believe it's in jeopardy because, like I've talked about many times, I feel like I was particularly sheltered from a lot of the more liberal, anti-family, anti-motherhood ideas, but nevertheless still was impacted by them to some extent. And so I think we really need to be on guard against that, and that's one reason I want to have my blog. Okay, so what the Rooster says for why millennials just don't want kids anymore is the first reason they gave was basically the world sucks. Like, there's so much crap going on. I don't want to bring them into this. I feel like there's too much instability. In the New York Times, they mentioned that too, where people were worried about global instability, climate change, population growth. Actually, that's probably a different topic, the population growth stuff. But as far as just, bad crap's going on in the world, I would so highly recommend this book, Factfulness, 10 Reasons or something why the world is actually better than you think. It is such a good book, at least to recognize how far we've come economically. I do believe that right now what we're in is we are experiencing severe spiritual poverty, where people just don't have the values, kind of rejected religion. In a lot of countries, it's really a post-Christian era. And when you don't have those deeper spiritual things grounding you, it's just, the world just is crazy. But if you think about it, they used to do crazy things. Like, they literally crucified Jesus, like hung him on the cross. Like, we don't do that. Most countries don't do that kind of thing anymore. It's a much less gruesome world than it was in some periods of time. And there used to be some periods of time where it's, even with child labor, like, it was kind of like, yeah, those kids, we're not sending them to the coal mines because we hate them or we don't want them to be educated. It's like, because we need to do that or we will starve because we need that money because there's so few resources, because there hasn't been enough production for the world to eat. We don't have that kind of stuff going on in general, especially in Western culture, especially in the United States. People who are hungry are obese, you know what I mean? Like, it's nutritional deficiencies, not so much literally ribs hanging out. The other reason, just being poor, just not having money. And the New York Times had a lot of that same stuff. Just, it's too expensive to have kids. I'm worried about the economy, financial, delaying children because of financial instability, concerned because there's not paid family leave, because apparently it's your employer's job to make sure you take care of things, or concerned about a career stall. Basically all financial related things. And of course, student debt is a big problem. Perhaps women should think a little harder before going to college if their goal is to be a stay-at-home mom. Just saying, I think it should be considered. There are so many different ways to make money these days, and the reality is that college does not add value to people. That could be a whole video in and of itself, but anyway, that's what they're saying. That's definitely things that I've seen. These are reasonable things. This isn't just millennials just being totally selfish and jerks. They're trying to be responsible, and they're like, and my bank account's super low, I can't have kids. It takes a lot of planning. It really does. My husband and I basically saved for 5 years so that one of us could be home. Also, the whole too much population already argument. That was something else that was found in the New York Times. Those kind of eco concerns, or people saying, oh, well, there's high rent because there's too many people. It's like, well, it depends on what city you live in. You should move to Waco, Texas. It is not that expensive there. Those kind of concerns. I believe so much of that climate change stuff is just total hogwash. There's actually a book I really want to read, but I saw an interview with the guy who wrote it, whose name I forget, but it's The Case for Fossil Fuels. And he's just really, I love the way he talks about stuff. He's just very smart, engineer, logical kind of person. And he really is just so pro-human flourishing is his terminology, and just points out how a lot of the more eco people, their goal tends to be, how can we get the world to look like humans don't live here? And I'm kind of like, do you think the lions are concerned with us humans? You know what I mean? They're going to take up their territory as much as they can. And I, as a Christian, I believe we should be, a good steward and not just, be cruel to animals, certainly, or or, you know, just throw stuff in the ocean for the heck of it. But like, there has to be some kind of cost benefit analysis and some kind of idea of, you know, what's reasonable. I just look around where I live, is not super populated, and I just see, when I just see unused land, I'm like, you know what, I would love some people there. And truth be told, I, as a Christian, I really believe that the be fruitful and multiply is still relevant. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, there's too many people now. But first off, there's not, and that's actually something else the book Factfulness talks about, how there's a dynamic of, at one point, you have this crazy population growth, and then people naturally stop having so many kids when they just achieve more wealth, and they start investing more into their fewer children. So it is not this like exponential forever, there will be 20 trillion people in the world. You know, there are some cities that have too many people probably. And so that's what's so great about the internet, and how the economy is shifting so that physical presence is not as needed anymore. So that kind of resolves a lot of that stuff. People who are concerned about a lot of the like eco stuff, I feel like, forget about technology and development, and that the way the world operates right now is not the way it always will. And I always just see like all of the one-story houses around where I live, and I'm like, you know, if land were that scarce, everywhere would be skyscrapers, right? Like, we'd always have skyscrapers because there's not enough land. Another one, basically pregnancy being unappealing. And I mean, they had some crazy quotes. Anyway, for me, I kind of can see a little bit more where people's mindset is at to then want abortion. Women were saying things like, I don't want my uterus to be used as rental property. Like, I don't even really know how to respond to that, except to say, like, that is a very different framing from the way I view my baby living in my womb. I do not view it as this unwelcome tenant who's taking over my property. They don't like the idea of pregnancy because it's like being a food source for something that lives inside of them. Again, strange. And your baby isn't literally eating you. It uses your nutrition. It's not like it's like eating my lungs. Pregnancy is obviously uncomfortable. It can really sound flippy. You know, you can hear horror stories about delivery. I don't know what to say except for it's worth it. But then actually, on the last one, basically they get down to like they don't have any desire to have children. And so if you don't really have any reason to have children, it is hard to overcome the thoughts of like, is this going to mess up my body? I'm going to gain weight, blah, blah, blah. You know, like there's all kinds of things to be concerned about. And if you have no real, you don't even want a child, like why would you, right? And so it's just very different, just this devaluing of children that's in our culture. I think this next one was really stupid, but it was basically other people have kids for selfish reasons. So like, I don't want to have a kid because other people have selfish reasons for having kids. And I will agree, like, it's not good to have kids for just totally self-absorbed reasons, you know, like, I just want to see a mini-me. I think sometimes people just say that, because it's hard to get into, you know, articulate the depth of the, like, a biological urge or of the desire, especially if you don't have a lot of, like, spiritual values to really express the legacy that you want to create. So it's a lot easier to just kind of say, I want a mini-me. I want to see what, you know, a baby would look like, you know, my baby would look like, or whatever. I hope most people actually have some other reasons, but I have seen that a lot of times, more so maybe celebrities, not that I know their life, but it does appear a little bit like kids are almost an accessory to them, like, oh, I guess I'll get one of those. But my encouragement to people would be, it's like, okay, if you don't want to have a kid for selfish reasons, like, don't do that. But that doesn't mean there's not unselfish reasons to have a kid that you maybe are just not even considering. And then also the fear of messing your kid up. I mean, my encouragement for people would be, well, first off, if you know you're a Christian, to say, okay, well, pray then. The best thing you can do is pray and help get God involved, because God is, you know, the best father, right? And he also he knows everything. and so pray that also maybe certain people would get involved in your kid's life in the areas that maybe you aren't, or that the Holy Spirit would guide you to notice things that you're neglecting or whatever, you know what I mean? There's a lot of things to do to try to overcome that, or maybe getting counseling. Like if you had really messed up parents, it's reasonable to say, I haven't seen a good modeling of parenthood. I don't know how to parent. Okay, well then learn. Although I must say, it is hard because there's so many contrary philosophies of how to parent that can be a little bit overwhelming, especially if you don't trust yourself. And then also, of course, the one that I thought would be higher up there on the list, for both the New York Times that did an actual survey and showed where these different things ranked, and then also the Rooster just put it lower on the list, but basically people choosing careers over kids and saying, I don't think I can achieve as much in my career if I have kids. And that is accurate. And that is why I do try to encourage women to just allow their husbands to fulfill their careers, and to be that support so that you can have this family unit that's operating without too much stress and everything else, and just saying motherhood is my career. Like a book I'm reading right now is Professionalizing Motherhood. So that's a great concept, to just say motherhood is my career for these years. Then another reason the Rooster gave was kids won't fix anything. So that's kind of another example of I don't want to have kids because I see that there are some bad reasons to have kids. And of course, I would agree. It's a bad idea to have kids to fix your marriage. It is a bad idea to have kids to create commitment in a relationship where there is not commitment. Those are bad ideas. Thinking kids will fix things, no, they really are a magnifier. I mean, I agree that that's true, but I don't really understand why say basically I don't want to have kids because this is a bad reason to have kids. I mean, I guess maybe what they're saying is that would be my only reason, but I recognize it's a bad reason. Which again goes to this last one of just no desire to have kids. So it's kind of I don't want kids, so why would I have kids? And I mean, this is how I kind of feel with it. If you don't want kids, you shouldn't have kids. And if this is where, your mindset is, and this is the way you view it, this is the way everything's framed for you, obviously it's not going to be helpful for somebody to be well, the baby boomers need some workers to, pay their Social Security, because the government is definitely going to use that money and efficiently, and it's, ethical to do this. But I guess I'm just saying, I think it's kind of sad that this is where we are at in our mentality towards children. And I am encouraged, though, that there, as much as there are a lot of people who are in this kind of framework regarding children, there really are also a lot of families and women who are not in that way. I mean, just the other day I met somebody who actually was a client of mine when I was coaching. She was passing through, and it's her and her husband have been planning their whole marriage, 4 children, and she's worked on creating a business from home for when she has children so she can be home. And there's a lot of stories like that. So there are people doing that, but then there's also a lot of people who are just a total different way of looking at these things. Okay, so with the New York Times, the only other ones that they added, reasons that people gave them for why they didn't want kids, was this isn't really not having kids, this is just having less kids, them wanting just small families so they can focus on the kids that they have. I do think that this is a reasonable thought. I feel a little bit more inclined towards the be fruitful and multiply aspect, although it is scary financially, especially if you think, I always say, man, going to a 5th child or something would really throw us off kilter. I don't know if we want that many children in that bathroom, kind of thing. And when you start needing a whole new, not even a van, a whole other car, that gets quite complicated financially. But even more so than just living on one income. But, I do believe that there are ways that you can work things out so that you can focus on your individual children, even when you have a lot. But it does take so much intentionality. Because there is a difference between just popping out child after child and then they're all getting kind of neglected, versus having a large family, that has a strong family identity, that all have a, you know, deep relationship with you. But that, like, that kind of thing doesn't happen by thinking with the mentality of, okay, my goal of parenting is just to take care of their basic needs and like love them in general. Like, there has to be a lot of intentionality. So the last one that got mentioned from the New York Times was just meeting a partner too late, or splitting from their partner, or their partner doesn't want kids. So all stuff relating to the relationship. And I would agree with that concept of, like, you definitely don't want to be having children with somebody you don't trust, with somebody you're not married to, which I think is a very sad concept, that we've sort of lost sort of the purpose, in some ways, the purpose of marriage, of having children. I recognize some people are also, you know, struggle with infertility, though there really is adoption, and adoption is a hard process. Paperwork pregnancies can last a lot longer and cost a whole lot more. But nevertheless, once you have those children, they're your children. It's that those are kind of tricky situations when people do want to have kids, but then there's relationship problems, and everything. And I guess my encouragement, if anybody is watching who's like a lot younger, is to just really be very intentional. And I do believe, you know, you have to be the right person to attract the right person. So if you are somebody who is prioritizing family, you do attract people who are prioritizing family. But if you're kind of in this, like the way the world kind of teaches us, or anyway, this is the way how I felt, was I was sort of encouraged to not think about it until I wanted children. But chances are you're not going to want, like, be feeling like, I want children, I'm ready for children, until you already are married for maybe a couple of years or whatever. I mean, I have talked to some women who are like, no, truth be told, like, I really did always just want to be a mom. And I was like, okay, well, that is cool for you. That was not my story. But nevertheless, my mom had very intentionally encouraged me to prioritize that. I had kind of a warning of my aunt had married somebody who didn't want children. And she just really did. That is not a joke. Like, if you want children, like, you need to make sure that happens, and the biological clock is real, and all this stuff that to some extent culture tries to deny. So, I mean, just the last little thought that I'll share is I saw in one of the articles I mentioned that last year the only fertility rise was in ages 40 to 44. It's not exactly that nobody is wanting children. I do believe that some people really will not go back and be like, oh man, but there are also a lot of people who get in, maybe it's not at 30, it's at 35, maybe it's not at 35, maybe it's at 40, and then go, oh gosh. And my mom actually does know somebody, this isn't a millennial situation, but a friend who they just never had children, and they do regret it now when the couple is in their like 60s or about 60. So
Mommy, it's time to go
yes,
to church.
I better go to church now, and I will talk to you all later. Thanks for watching. Hit the like button and subscribe if you want to hear the next video that I have. Leave me comments with things you'd want to hear about.
Mommy,
all right, bye.